Humanities, English and arts research is under fire from every direction. Cuts to university funding, whole courses being cancelled, students being discouraged from taking these subjects for A-level or at university, and between 2023 and 2024, 4,000 academic jobs at university in these subjects were lost. 4,000. Hello, it's Ruby, and in today's video I want to talk about the value of arts, humanities and English at university, why these are such incredibly important subjects for us to be studying and continue funding. This is an age where arts and humanities are seen as unprofitable, which really kicked off with Rishi Sunak calling these so-called rip-off degrees in 2023. It feels sensible, perhaps, that when money is tight, we should cut funding to the arts, humanities and social sciences. And this is absolutely a narrative which is pushed by the media. It's something that I hear all the time as somebody who studied English, people saying, well, this is useless. This is a useless thing to be studying. But the data does suggest otherwise. Before COVID, 8 of the 10 top industries in the UK hired a majority of social science and humanities graduates. And arts and humanities do actually contribute significantly to the UK economy, which is something we either forget or just don't know about. Now, the reason I'm talking about this today specifically is because Exeter University is the most recent victim of this onslaught and kind of major budget cuts when it comes to arts and the humanities. And if you didn't know, I studied at Exeter University. I started at Exeter in 2018 studying philosophy and theology, and then after a year I changed to English and I graduated in 2022. And I documented the entirety of my time at Exeter University here on YouTube. I had such an amazing academic experience, and that was because of my tutors. I had extraordinary tutors. Like, honestly, I could not have wished for better tutors, but the university is proposing extreme cuts to the humanities and English. They have threatened 500 jobs with 153 which will go, and 85% of those job cuts are in English and the humanities. 85%, which means that this is an attack directly on humanities and on English. And these cuts have been everywhere. There have been articles written about it. Stephen Fry has publicly spoken out, and there is a petition which currently has over 30,000 signatures. This is a petition which I also would genuinely really appreciate you signing as you're listening to this video. We're trying to get the petition to 50,000 signatures, and it would really mean a lot to me personally, and I know to all of the staff at Exeter. The link is in the description box. In this video, I essentially want to break down the value of these subjects, the humanities and the arts and English, and why they are necessary. It's a question that people ask me all the time as somebody who has studied English, and so that really is like the topic, the subject of this video. So we'll think about the value of the humanities in relation to STEM, the very human and intrinsic importance of these subjects, their financial value, which is something which I think we often overlook, and also the importance of critical thinking in the world today. And then after that, and this is the best bit about this video, some of my tutors have contributed videos of them sharing why the arts, English, humanities are important. And these videos are filled with such wisdom and insight. Like, these are people who have dedicated their lives to these disciplines, and they know better than anyone why they are so important and why we can't be making cuts to these subjects. In this video, we'll also be talking about the specific situation at Exeter and addressing the kind of misconception that this is financially necessary for the university, because as we will hear later, it actually is not. Okay, so STEM. Now, it's easy to articulate the value of a STEM degree, both economically and societally. Also partially because these conversations are being had in schools. It's something people are being incentivized, encouraged to study. And of course these subjects are important. I'm not going to sit here and say that STEM isn't important, because it is. But the value of the STEM degree is often, just like when we talk about these subjects, it's often put next to the valuelessness of the humanities degree. The idea being generally that STEM is important, ergo the humanities are not. Now, of course, this is not true, because both can be valuable, both are valuable, and both are valuable when they work together. For example, we need the humanities so that we can think critically about technological advancement. You can't have that advancement without also having the why questions that come from and are discussed within the humanities. And Einstein was actually a really big proponent of this and said that the humanities are necessary if you want to study science. So he said, students can, quote, learn to understand the motives of human beings, their illusions and their sufferings through the humanities. In A Message to Intellectuals, which is a paper that he published in 1948, he says, and I quote, penetrating research and keen scientific work have often had tragic implications for mankind, producing, on the one hand, inventions which liberate man from exhausting physical labour, making his life easier and richer, but on the other hand, introducing a grave restlessness into his life, making him a slave to his technological environment, and, most catastrophic of all, creating the means for his own mass destruction. Keep in mind that this is coming in 1948, so shortly after the nuclear attacks in Japan. And kind of in other words, what Einstein is saying here is that we can't have STEM, we can't have technological advancement without adjacent work and questioning from the humanities. With the growth of AI especially, and as a very key example here, the ethics of AI are equally as important. You can't have the growth of it without also thinking about the ethics of it. And that is a question of and for the humanities. So what are the humanities? The 1980 Humanities Report put it well. Through the humanities, we reflect on the fundamental question, what does it mean to be human? The humanities offer clues, but never a complete answer. They reveal how people have tried to make moral, spiritual, and intellectual sense of a world where irrationality, despair, loneliness, and death are as conspicuous as birth, friendship, hope, and reason. Science is about finding evidence and hypothesizing and testing evidence to uncover truth about the universe and human behavior and nature, but the humanities, that's about studying what it means to be a human and to exist in the world that humans have created. Without studying the humanities, we lose sight of who we are. And as we've discussed, we can't responsibly integrate technology into society without this knowledge. And then there is English, books, stories, literature. These help us understand the world in which we live. And that's not through evidence, it's not through hypotheses, it's through a medium which connects one soul to another. And it's like, to kind of quote Jane Eyre, whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Literature and arts, that's what builds our soul. I always think of that quote from Dead Poets Society where Mr. Keating says, and I've literally got it here in my journal because I look at it so often, medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life, but poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. And you need only pick up a book to be reminded of that power. I thought actually I would read to you from this poem, O Me, O Life by Walt Whitman, which again is one that Mr. Keating quotes in Dead Poets Society. And his answer to this question of O me, O life, of the questions of these reoccurring, is that you are here, that life exists and identity, that powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. And this was written in the mid-19th century in America, and it rings just as true, and the sentiment is just as true about what it means to live, what it means to exist. Literature is it's able to connect us in and kind of help us understand ourselves and understand the world in which we live in, as I say, I think a way that nothing else helps us to do. I think we know intuitively and we know intrinsically that the arts are important, that they are a crucial part of being human and what it means to be human. But I also understand that these can feel like quite woolly reasons, I think they're such important reasons for us to protect these subjects, and but still I do acknowledge that it's kind of in a conversation where profitability and economics are really at the heart, they can feel like unsubstantial arguments. And so instead, I just want to stress that actually on the other end of the scale, these subjects are still financially viable and economically necessary, and that's something which people often forget when talking about arts, humanities, English. For example, did you know that for every £1 which is invested into the creative industries, there is a £2.50 return for the global economy? Indeed, the UK is known for its creative industries, and this is one of its greatest exports. In 2021, for example, the creative industries generated £108 billion for the UK economy and employed 2.3 million people, which is an increase of 49% between 2011 and 2021. And humanities, despite what mainstream media will say, and despite what often comes up in conversation, actually is not unemployable. Surprisingly, perhaps, in 2025, JISC reported that the degree with the highest unemployment rate was computer science, with an unemployment rate of 9.7% 15 months after graduating. So I studied English literature, and one of the key questions that I was asked anytime I'd say what degree I did would be, but how is that useful? How are you going to get a job at the end of this? That's not very employable. But according to these same JISC statistics, 6.3% of English graduates were employed. And that is higher than economics, mechanical engineering, law, and finance and accounting. And all of those degree subjects there are ones which are often cited as being incredibly employable and the degrees that you should be doing if you want to get a job. But the statistics released by JISC suggest otherwise. The statistics in this chart point to how these subjects are not unemployable. And actually, George Anders, who used to be the technology reporter at Forbes, even wrote a book about this. And the book explores how in Silicon Valley, often employers are looking for people who have the skills that you get from a humanities or social science degree. They're looking for the critical thinking skills it gives you, the creative ways of thinking about things, the synoptic thinking, which come with studying arts, humanities, English, social sciences. And George Anders says, and I quote, these subjects, quote, are valued by everyone except the media. Indeed, before COVID in the UK, 8 of the 10 top industries in the UK hired a majority of humanities and social science graduates. So yes, humanities and English and arts degrees are not useless, and they are not useless for the economy. Especially because when there is access to art, there was a study in Gloucestershire which found that medical health can be improved by having that access to the arts, and the NHS savings on this were quite considerable. So actually investing in the arts can have this financial return which benefits the UK economy. The other key thing which we have to talk about when talking about English and the humanities is critical thinking and media literacy and these necessary skills which these subjects teach and propagate, which are more important now than ever. Because what happens when we stop being able to think critically? It's becoming increasingly key as search engines replace lists of sources with automated overviews, which often can include factual inaccuracies or can be politically skewed one way. It becomes incredibly key when we remember that only 30% of adults say they can confidently tell when a piece of content is AI generated. And I can't not remind you of that famous 1984 quote. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Critical thinking is never not going to be important. And the media literacy statistics from Ofcom are shocking. So only 45% of adults feel confident to judge if information that they read is true. And this surely indicates that these skills are more necessary than ever. This is not the time that we should be cutting funding from the subjects which are teaching us critical thinking skills. I think it's especially upsetting because universities are historically built on these principles of intellectual autonomy and freedom of thought, and critical thinking skills are essential if universities are going to continue to be these spaces of free knowledge. Now, I have talked about a few reasons why arts, English, humanities are important, but as I say, I am not the best person to talk about this. I care about these subjects so much. This is something I care very deeply about. But my tutors at Exeter, these are people who have dedicated much of their lives to studying these subjects and dedicated much of their lives to studying them because they know how important they are. And so I don't think there's anyone better who can really articulate why these subjects and these faculties are so necessary. So some of my tutors from Exeter have been kind enough to contribute to this video and basically share why arts, humanities, English are important.
My name is Pascal Abischer. I'm Professor of Shakespeare and Early Modern Performance Studies at the University of Exeter. I want to tell you about why arts and humanities and social sciences matter so much, especially at times of crisis. When the pandemic struck, I just finished writing a book, a very theoretical book, about Shakespeare and digital performance. And I used that knowledge right away to draw up a research project with Creation Theatre in Oxford, a company that had managed to pivot to Zoom performances and was thus able to continue to employ its creative staff, even when there was no government help for independent freelancers. So I worked with the company and also Equity UK to create some employment guidelines for artistic workers working in isolation. And we also did some research on the benefits of doing Zoom performance during lockdown. We found that audiences were hugely grateful for the work that the company was doing and that it really brought them mental health benefits when they were in isolation. I then took the knowledge from that project to coordinate the arts and humanities research response to COVID-19 across the UK, 77 projects funded by the AHRC. And what I observed was that everywhere across the country, arts and humanities and social sciences researchers pivoted using their knowledge, often theoretical knowledge, in order to get right in there in the COVID-19 frontline. We had people working with prisoners in the Liverpool City region. We had modern languages specialists working with immigrant communities to figure out why there was more vaccine hesitancy in some areas. We had a fashion designer who designed sustainable, reusable PPE that actually fitted the bodies of NHS workers. We had an ethics prof who suddenly worked with care home managers in order to help them interpret government guidance. The list could go on. It's 77 items long. What we learned from that is that in a time of crisis, the people that you need to be able to deal with the human impacts of the crisis and bring evidence from the front line straight to policymakers in real time are arts and humanities and social sciences researchers. When the proverbial hits the fan, you really do want us there to help you out.
Hi, I'm John Plunkett from the University of Exeter. I think that studying literature and the humanities is key to developing our critical and creative thinking, and this is something I try and get over to all of the students I encounter. I think in a world that's increasingly dominated by data, by technology and AI, that we need to remember what it means to be human and the way in which that's being changed by all the things going on around us. At its simplest, literature and culture more broadly is a way in which we represent ourselves to ourselves and thereby come to understand who we are. And it's this need for greater understanding and critical thinking that's kind of all too evident in our current world. Literature helps us to understand ourselves, but it also helps us to be put in the position of others, other writers, other narratives, other stories, other nations. And this is where kind of literature and humanities helps us to think, to teach us about the meanings of being human and the way in which they've changed over time and the way in which they may change again in the future. And for all of those who kind of wonder about the value of an English degree, the value of a humanities degree, and what can I do with that? When I kind of open my computer this morning, look at kind of what's making the news, we have now a new Prime Minister who has kind of a degree in English literature. The newspapers and social media is full of kind of reviews of the latest Christopher Nolan film of The Odyssey, Nolan being himself an English literature graduate. So we look around us and see what kind of the creative and the critical thinking contributes to both our individual lives and to our collective lives. And this is why I think it's so important.
I had the pleasure of teaching Ruby when she was at Exeter. My name's Wendy Madore, otherwise known as Writer in the Shed or Professor O'Shea Madore. And Ruby's just asked me why I think we need the humanities. Well, I think the answer's probably in the question. humanities, human, what it means to be human. The humanities help us understand this. They help us understand ourselves and understand others, even if they're from a different culture, a different perspective, different type of neurodivergence, somewhere else in the world. They give us that common language, and that ability to understand, to empathise, to have compassion. And I think in a troubled world, that's increasingly important. Only recently, I've been having AI training companies approach me, asking me if I can train AI to be more human, to be more compassionate, to understand contradictions and quirks. I think that's one of the most valuable skills that we have, and we need to learn to hang on to it. I also think that the humanities teaches critical thinking. And in a time when we're so dependent on our phones, including me, I think that ability to question the information we're being given is vital. And if we don't, and I'm saying this on a very hot day, when you're thinking about the climate crisis as well, if we don't learn to harness those skills, it's highly likely that the world will burn. So yes, we do need to come together to save our humanities, to save our ability to communicate, to save our ability to be compassionate, to think from the perspective of others, to find common ground.
Hi, I'm Ellen Wiles. I'm a novelist, artist, a creative writing academic, and why do the arts and humanities matter? That's because we have some really big problems to face as a species, some existential problems, and arts and humanities are vital parts of the puzzle. One of the biggest problems is the environmental crisis, climate change and biodiversity loss, and linked with that, water resilience. And scientists have proved the extent of this crisis time and time again, and they have solutions, but their message isn't getting through fast enough. They have a ton of amazing data, but data doesn't move people. Data doesn't tell a compelling story. Scientists know this. I'm working as an artist in residence at the moment in a science centre, and we need stories reflecting the complexity and urgency of nature restoration and climate adaptation that can engage people and make them want to take action. The other major problem, which is currently making itself out to be a helpful improvement to our lives, is AI. It's moving at lightning speed, and it's threatening not only human jobs but whole systems that keep our species going. And it's also creating insane wealth inequality, billionaires who lost touch with ordinary people's lives and have power that they could misuse in frightening ways. So we really need critical and creative thinking to anticipate and counter the issues that throws up, to remind us what's wonderful about being human and why our entangled life with other species on this planet is so incredible and worth fighting for. Also, robots aren't funny. Humans are funny. That's not nothing, right? Imagine a world with no jokes in it, no laughter, with no Bach, no Ella Fitzgerald, no Nora Ephron. We all need to cultivate our critical and creative thinking more than ever right now.
Hi, I'm Louise Lawrence. I'm Professor of New Testament Interpretation at the University of Exeter. I work in the Department of Classics, Ancient History, Religion and Theology, and we are part of the Humanities and Social Sciences faculty here at Exeter. Across our department, my colleagues are tackling some of the biggest issues of our time: the ethics of AI, religious diversity and conflict, environmental responsibility, climate justice, sexuality, gender, disability, memorialisation and trauma, and much, much more. We don't just study the past, we help make sense of how the past and its forces shape our future. I often tell my first year students, I'm not only interested in the worlds that created the Bible, I'm also interested in the worlds the Bible, for good and ill, continued to create. The greatest challenges we all face cannot be solved by science or tech alone. They demand people who can understand culture, histories, stories, values and beliefs, who can think critically, communicate generously across difference, and navigate ethical complexity with wisdom and compassion. And that's what the humanities can do. We don't just produce graduates, we produce interpreters, intercultural communicators, writers, creatives, critical thinkers, and ethical leaders. If universities are really serious about preparing students for uncertain futures, sustaining the humanities isn't an optional extra. Democracy itself depends on it. As one of our advocates recently said, the humanities aren't the icing on the cake. they are the cake. And another, in a world preoccupied with asking how, the humanities always insist on the deeper, more enduring question, why?
Hello, I'm Professor David Tollerton from University of Exeter. So for me, theology and religion is such a vital subject because I think it's most importantly about developing critical empathy. And what I mean by that is empathizing and understanding other people's worldviews, understanding the traditions, the rituals, the histories of how they understand their identities, but doing it in a critical way. So not just sort of accepting everything unconditionally as straightforward, but sort of really understanding the complexities of what's going on, but understanding how people are different, how people have very different worldviews from one another, and how we can understand each other and get along a little bit better. So I think that theology and religion at university is so important right at the moment because of rising feelings of nationalism, of people trying to sow division between communities, but also because of changes in digital technologies, the rise of AI. I think it's so important to just sometimes have human beings in a room talking about the ideas, looking past the kind of compilation of information that AI sometimes just scrapes off the web, but actually thinking about things more deeply, thinking about human feelings and traditions and emotions and identities, and kind of really critically interrogating them together. So I think theology and religion in university is so important because we need a place for open inquiry on these topics. Out there in the world, with religious communities, there are all manner of sensitivities, kind of sacred boundaries which are awkward to cross. And that's okay, that's the way that faith communities work. I think what's useful and vital about having theology and religion at a university is it's a space where people can really kind of talk openly about these things. And my colleagues and I come from all sorts of religious and non-religious perspectives, and the idea is that it's an open space for critical conversation. So over the last few decades in Britain, there's been an apparent rise in the number of people self-identifying as non-religious. But in theology and religion at university, we want to look beyond that sort of simple metric. We want to think globally. So how this rise of the non-religious is actually quite a local phenomenon. And so think about what's going on with religion around the world and how it's affecting politics and conflicts and change all around the world. But even in Britain, just to look beyond the surface, because even people self-identifying as non-religious is much more complicated than it seems. A lot of it rests on a long history of Christianity in Britain, and those legacies don't get swept away so easily. The relationships between non-religion, Christianity, Islam, other religions are all swirling in a really complex mix in Britain today. And so we want to think about that critically and openly in a university space.
Why study theology and religion? What's the point? What's it for? I'm Susanna Cornwall. I teach theology and religion at the University of Exeter. I would say one of the things that's really brilliant about our subject is it's to do with what really matters to people. It's to do with big questions people ask themselves and have asked themselves for centuries and centuries. I think in Britain in particular, sometimes people feel like religion is a bit of a niche subject. Britain feels like quite a secular country. I think that's true in lots of ways, but Britain is quite unusual compared with the rest of the world. And actually, if we look around us, we can see that religious discourses and religious questions underlie things like contested land claims, people's motivations for the political views they hold, people's views about things like gender and sexuality, and all sorts of things. So to me, it doesn't feel like a niche thing. One of the things that I think is really great about this subject is it allows you to think about and reflect on what you believe and what other people believe too. And in particular to think, how is it that different people can look at the same evidence and in good faith and critically come to different conclusions about it. How is that possible? Also though, theology and religion is teaching you the skills to recognise when an argument is actually not being made in good faith, when it's being made for other reasons. It's really important to be able to spot those things and interrogate them too.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Welton. I am a lecturer in Biblical Studies and the Hebrew Bible at the University of Exeter in the Department of Classics, Ancient History, Religion and Theology. And the study of religion, I think, is vital for an understanding of so much of human history and culture. Sacred texts such as the Bible have influenced literature, art, film, television and even video games. And in order to comprehend what these cultural objects mean to humanity, it's vital to understand the ancient traditions that lie behind them. There are currently live debates in the public square that are influenced by religious belief, such as reproductive rights, gay marriage, trans rights, support and care for the impoverished, land rights for Indigenous peoples who have been colonised, and the protection and treatment of women and children in relation to abuse. If we want a fairer, healthier and greener society, we need the humanities to get us there, so that we can think critically about how the world is changing and who will be impacted by developments in technologies such as AI, the advancing climate crisis, the impacts of space travel, the spread of new diseases. If we lose the lecturers and researchers that investigate what it is to be human in all its manifestations and potentials, then we cannot train the next generation who will be the ones that face the most significant changes to the world and humanity as we know it. We must protect the humanities and social sciences now so that they can protect generations in the future and ensure the flourishing of our cultures and societies.
I really am so grateful to my tutors for saying yes when I asked if they would share some words about the humanities and English. I think it also encapsulates how personable the tutors are. And with all of what's going on, it's made me reflect and think about how positive my experience with tutors was. I was warned when I went to university that lecturers wouldn't know my name and that it would be nothing like school, and of course it's different to school, but every single one of my tutors knew my name. Every single one of my tutors knew the things that I was interested in. Many of them would give extra resources if they knew that it was something that I'd find interesting. All in all, I just had genuinely great tutors. I had such a positive experience at university academically, and that was because of the people that taught me. And it's these tutors, the tutors who have contributed to this video, whose jobs are being threatened. These are real people, and they are lovely, wise, intelligent people, and it breaks my heart what is happening. Just think, 500 jobs have been threatened, 500 with 150 people who will lose their jobs, and people don't even know who's going to lose their jobs. These are also the same tutors that during COVID showed up every single week for us. This is when everything at university was closed. It's not like we had access to the buildings or the library or any of the amazing resources that the university has. All we had was the tutors. A whole year of my experience at university was only the tutors, and I still had a really positive experience. I was very lucky to have a really positive experience because my tutors showed up every week, because my tutors would offer to kind of meet one-on-one to go through an essay or a specific topic. One of my professors, Pascal Bischer, who also spoke in that video, set up an amazing asynchronous seminar which would run for hours every Monday. It was just one of the most academically rigorous seminars that I did, even though it was completely online. And she also organised for lecturers and experts in the topics we were learning about to send in videos and do live video lectures and seminars so that we really could push our learning. And she just went the extra mile to make sure that we had such a great learning experience. Another of my amazing tutors was Paul Williams, who set up this incredible online lecture and seminar series again in 2020 about the US elections and helped us to understand what was happening and understand the politics and how this related to American history, and it was absolutely fascinating. Tim Kendall set up an online reading group for Sylvia Plath, again during lockdown, so that we could still be involved in the intellectual like bubble that university is, even though we weren't there. And then others of my tutors, like David Tollerton, who again spoke in this video just now, ran weekly Zoom calls for our seminars every single week. And there were obviously trials, like I know everyone who had lessons during lockdown will know that, but our tutors always tried, and they gave so much to us during that time. They were always there for office hours, they were always there to answer questions, and they were there even though we weren't allowed on campus. At that time, as I say, the university was only the tutors, and if that doesn't prove that tutors are the bedrock of the university, I don't know what does. We got the same level of education during lockdown because of our tutors. You can do university without the building, even without the resources, but you can't do university without the tutors. Now, I don't know the statistics on humanities as a whole, but the New Statesman reported that 1/3 of the English department would be cut. 1/3 of the English department. That's absolutely huge. And no, that's not because numbers are dropping. So the brunt of the cuts will instead fall on the staff, as the 2/3 who are left will have to pick up all of the seminars and tutees and student support, because there just won't be as many tutors. Like Exeter at the moment, as it is such a strong university. The English faculty, the theology faculty, the philosophy faculty, they are all so strong. They are such strong faculties, and I recommend them so highly because they are so strong and because the tutors are so wonderful. And so it's just heartbreaking that they're planning on changing that when it's so good as it is. And like, these faculties have a really good reputation as well. It was because of the English faculty's reputation that I applied for it in the first place. And because I knew the theology faculty was so strong, that's why I felt comfortable switching from English to theology. Like when I was at school and I'd hear the word Exeter University, I'd always think of the humanities and English. Like, that's something it's so strong for and it's known for. What concerns me is, you know, it's such an excellent university and the education that it provides is so strong, and yet because of these cuts and because of the number of staff members that are going to have to leave, like, how can we expect the university to deliver the same standard of teaching? Like, it's impossible. They can't. And I think that's so sad because the university is so good as it is right now, and that's why it's so important that we defend it at this stage too, because like, for Exeter to turn around, if Exeter turned around right this second and they revoked these decisions, they could get rid of the reputational damage which has already started to accrue, and students who are going into Exeter would know that their university cares about them and kind of have that same standard of teaching that they were promised when they signed up for the course. I had such a good experience, and it makes me emotional genuinely to think about the way that real people are being targeted through this. So I'm actually now going to call somebody from the Exeter Union to ask him a bit more about what's happening. So I'm going to call him on Zoom now. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for talking with me. So one thing I keep on hearing people say about the thing that's what's happening at Exeter is that it's necessary and it's something which the university has to do because it's the only way to kind of recoup money which has been lost. Is this true?
No, it's the exact opposite of truth. It's certainly true that universities and HE generally have had a rough few years, but Exeter is one of the universities that's doing financially well. It's in a really strong position. It's never failed to run a budget surplus, even, and it took quite a bit of pushing on the union's part, even in 25, 26, the last year for which there's completed financial records, the university ran a budget surplus. It has in total over 2/3 of $1 billion in reserves. Not all of that is cash though, but it's got £212 million in cash reserves, i.e. money that can pretty much instantly access in order to say we did run a deficit, which we have never. If we were to run a deficit of £5 million in a year, that would be a thing that you could, in an emergency, dip into your cash reserves to sort out. And with 212 million of cash reserves, Exeter should be sitting, I don't want to say sitting pretty, because it's important to maintain a kind of sound financial management so we can continue to do the great courses and research we love to do. But that's been done. That's kind of mission accomplished already. There's no financial justification for doing this.
But if the university did need to raise money, would
like, would this be a good way to do it? Cutting 150 jobs, 85% of which would be from humanities.
Yeah, it would be if we had a need to close a financial gap, this would be a terrible way to do it for a bunch of reasons. First of all, although it's 150 full-time equivalent, it's going to be 200 individual people who lose their jobs.
Really?
So, I mean, it kind of shows you how these institutions don't think about, these managers don't think about people. They think about kind of functions, right? So an FT is a full-time equivalent, so like as if someone was working full-time. But obviously various people work as a 0.6 or a 0.8, working 3 days a week. So it's 150 full-time equivalent, but it's probably going to be around about 200 actual real flesh and blood human beings. And I don't know how you go around the world, but I go around the world thinking about real human beings and flesh and blood, not not mythical spreadsheet human beings. It'd
Which
be a
actually is
terrible
the
way to
value
try.
of humanities, right? As well. The
Yeah,
value of
yeah,
that's why we need the humanities at Exeter.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, to kind of embed us in ways of remembering our common humanity and what it is to live and breathe and be an embodied human being with feelings and needs. Sorry, not trying to slip into lecture mode there. But it would be a terrible way to try and cut money because save money by cutting staff in this way because this is one of the productive parts of the university. The university can make money only in a couple of ways. It brings money through research, high quality research grants, and it brings money through basically, getting undergraduates to come and attend our course, particularly home undergraduates. That's the main source of the University of Exeter's income. And the humanities at Exeter are awesome at doing those things, where there's remarkable world-leading research done by the humanities, and it's also a real engine for the university for getting students in. Its reputation, and I'm not trash talking the other faculties. Across the board, the university is great. But historically, and still in this moment in time, the university's reputation built on its humanities reputation. And there's a real kind of positive halo effect from that, when you've got a university where it's got, one of the best English departments in the country, one of the best philosophy departments, one of the best theology departments, one of the best history departments, and I'm sorry, and I'm not criticizing a department. I didn't just rattle off the top of my head there. But, once you've got a university with that then spreads and lifts up the whole university, and it's incredibly short-sighted to take for granted the financial contribution that the humanities at Exeter makes to the whole institution. However, and we're not in this situation, but if we wanted to save money, the union has raised to management a really easy way of saving a few £1 million a year, which is to have a voluntary £120,000 pay cap for managers. If we were to do this, 120,000, I mean, I've never had the misfortune. I know, I've never had the misfortune to try and live on £120,000 a year. That's like, yeah, that's pushing 3 times my salary. But if just the 16 highest paid executives, not including the vice chancellor, but if just the 16 highest paid executives capped their salary, didn't lose their jobs, capped their salary at £120,000 a year, that would save more than cutting all the proposed cuts in archaeology and history. That on its own would save archaeology and history overnight, no jobs lost. It's incredible that that's not the first thing responsible managers would go to save money. If they're worried about money, be like, right, okay, no one loses their job, no productive work stops, nothing is interrupted, no student misses out on a lecturer, nothing at all. We just only take
reputation is maintained
a
for the
huge
university
salary.
as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that, the vice chancellor alone, if their salary, which their current pay and benefits reaches nearly £400,000 a year. So if that was capped at £120,000, you'd be able to again free up. So what's that? That's £260,000. The median salary at Exeter is £40,000. So that's Yeah, I'm not in the maths department, I'm in the English department, but I think that's 9.5 people.
Like, and flesh and blood people as well. That's the kind of
Yeah, 9.5 flesh and blood people who could keep their jobs, whatever half a person is. And that would only be the vice chancellor capping their pay at
that's
£120,000 a year, which, like
unbelievable.
I say, I imagine you can get by on £120,000. I'm sure you can. It sounds all right.
Oh my gosh. So why would these cuts even be proposed then?
That is something we're kind of scratching our heads about. And I think you know, bad ideas don't just have one parent, I think.
Mm.
There's a whole bunch of mistakes that have to happen to get to a place like this. I think one is a bit of groupthink amongst the people who are supposed to be leading higher education. You know, the UCEA and UK, the organisations that bring together the heads of the different universities and higher education institutions. You know, I think they're fundamentally, and it's not criticism of any individuals, but fundamentally their positions are quite conservative and unimaginative, and I think they have a quite closed off groupthink.
Mm.
And I think ludicrously, these people who are supposed to be the champions of humanities in higher education, they've sort of bought into the argument that humanities is a bit passé, it's had its day, that it's not where the exciting research is being done, it's not what students want, it's not what's in step with kind of sexy ideas around the development of our economy or our country. And it's just factually wrong, right? That's just a mistake. You know, the UK has, for example, a remarkable reputation in the creative industries. It's got an
Absolutely.
incredible, yeah,
And in terms of
incredible.
exports, right? You know, the amount of money that kind of creative creative work brings into the economy is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's also a question about what kind of country is it, or what kind of world it is that we want to live in. And do we want to live in a world where we're encouraging things like critical thinking, we're encouraging imaginative, interdisciplinary problem solving, if we're encouraging like the exploration and appreciation of the human being through
Mm.
art, right? These are some of the things, these sound a bit kind of, maybe they sound woolly to some people, but they're not. These are things which improve the cultural and social fabric of our world. And we need to defend them. And particularly the people who are supposed to be the custodians of our higher education system, they should be defending it. They really should.
Thank you so much, Michael. So, like, I appreciate your insight and your wisdom so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I can't believe that. Honestly, I knew it was a bad situation. I knew that it wasn't necessary financially, but I didn't realize like how unnecessary it was. And it makes me think that it just like this is an ideological decision. This is a decision to take funding away from the humanities to like make a shift as a university away from English and the humanities. And it's so sad when Exeter has built its reputation on these subjects that it would now just move away from them. I've also actually just heard from Dr. Peter Riley, who is another lecturer at the University of Exeter in English, and he's explained why this attack on the humanities is ideological and why essentially it is dangerous.
Hey Ruby, thanks so much for this platform, really appreciate it. I just wanted to hop on here and say a few things about what's going on here at Exeter. So right now we're seeing a systematic ideological attempt to basically dismantle the humanities and the social sciences at this institution. This is a place that is supposed to foster critical thinking, and it's basically trying to downsize, silence, and destroy the very subjects that teach us how to think for ourselves. And I think we should be real about why they're trying to do this. They're trying to destroy the humanities because we offer criticism. We offer them criticism because we are awkward, because we refuse to nod along to corporate top-down decisions, right? In other words, they are targeting us because I think we play a vital role in upholding democracy and exercising basic civil liberties. Exeter finds itself really at the forefront of the battle for the humanities at the moment. And honestly, to the decision-making people, individuals who think they can quietly phase us out, you completely underestimate our collective resolve here, our generational rage. The world is watching, the media is watching. The humanities are not just a luxury. As Stephen Fry said last week, quote, "The humanities are not the icing on the cake, they are the cake." The humanities are the bedrock of how we understand our world, our history and each other. And listen, with the rise of AI, they are more important than ever. I don't think there's any more urgent work going on in universities than trying to understand what it means to be human right now. And listen, just last thing, this is a genuine privilege to be part of this historic moment. And I do this with joy in my heart. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild this brilliant, precious place from the ground up. No cuts, only investment in us. We will fight you for 1,000 years for this. So yeah, thanks Ruby. Let's stand up for the humanities.
I think the irony of this too is that when we cut funding to humanities, when we reduce the number of researchers who are working within the humanities, when we put limits indirectly on the number of students who will be applying for a course like Exeter to study humanities and English, we're also deciding what things are intellectually important. Because research, like where we decide to research and what academics decide to research, does inform what things are deemed important and what things are deemed valuable. And if we stop studying the humanities, then there's a catch-22 effect where over time the humanities become less and less valuable because kind of in these initial stages they're not being deemed as valuable. And I think one of the most upsetting parts is that we're seeing in real time us stepping away from our humanness. This is ideological and it's an attack on humanities subjects because 85% of the job cuts are for English and humanities staff. It's not STEM subjects being targeted. It's not the quote-unquote profitable subjects, even though research from the British Academy shows that graduates in arts, humanities and social sciences are just as likely to be employed as those who study STEM. And it's upsetting and heartbreaking to see us stepping away from our humanness. You know, education isn't about optimization, and optimizing education for the sake of economic growth, for the sake of profitability, which from an administration point of view, from a governmental point of view, with Rishi Sunak's disincentives for studying these subjects a couple of years ago. Like, education is about thinking critically and it's about learning to think as opposed to just optimizing. And it's so sad that we're getting rid of the subjects, we're getting rid of the studies that machines can't do. And you know I recommend Exeter. You know, when somebody says, do you recommend Exeter? Would you recommend this as a university? I always say yes, and I say yes because of the tutors. I say the English faculty is so strong. You want to study theology at Exeter? I cannot recommend it enough. It's such a personable department, so much passion, so much enthusiasm. Like, I had such a positive experience academically at the university. And so, you know, kind of as a message to Exeter, I hope that Exeter can continue to be a university that its alumni are proud to have gone to and are proud to recommend. And alumni agree with me as well. The cuts to Exeter are everywhere in the press. I keep on seeing it everywhere. Friends of mine at Exeter like kind of commenting on it and sharing it. And I anecdotally know of one young person who has a place to study history at Exeter in September and now won't be taking that space because of the way that Exeter is treating the humanities. And it's disappointing, and it's not the university that I know. And other Exeter students and alumni agree with me. So I've asked those people to stand with me in this video and show their support for their tutors.
My name is Hannah. I studied English at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Sophie. I studied film and television at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Robin. I study classics at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name's Chloe. I'm studying for a BA in Philosophy, Religion and Ethics at Exeter and I stand with my tutors. My name's Phoebe Holland. I studied history and archaeology at the University of Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name's Eleanor. I'm studying history and theology at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Georgie. I studied classical studies at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
I'm Sarah Gould. I studied English and creative writing at the University of Exeter and I stand by my tutors.
My name is Lucy. I studied drama at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Juliet and I studied English at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Jasmine. I studied English and creative writing at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
I'm Zev Pally and I studied English and creative writing at the University of Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Jasmine. I study history at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Molly. I study English at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
Hello, my name is Izzy and I studied English at Exeter and I support my tutors.
My name's Sasha. I studied geography at the University of Exeter's Penryn campus and I stand with my lecturers.
I'm Helen and I studied English and creative writing at the University of Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Alex. I studied politics at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name's Fleur. I studied history at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Steve. I studied law at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Mackenzie Dewar-Gibb. I'm a third-year global politics student at the Penryn campus and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Blakeney. I studied English literature at Exeter University and I stand firmly with my tutors.
My name is Daisy. I study history at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Zamir. I studied philosophy at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Matty. I studied mathematics at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Natalie Thompson. I studied English literature at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Lucy. I studied drama at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Isabel. I study English at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Oliver Kleinschmidt. I studied history and publishing at the University of Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Petunia and I studied English and biochemistry at Exeter and I stand with my tutors.
I'm Emma. I studied English at Exeter in 2006 and I stand with my tutors.
My name is Zoe. I studied French, German and Spanish at Exeter. I stand with my tutors.
Thank you so much for watching this video. It's something I care very, very strongly about, just on a personal level, but also because of what it points to more broadly. Like, cuts to the humanities are dangerous and they are happening across the board. They're happening across institutions. We're seeing kind of funding being cut from bodies as well as institutions as well, and it's dangerous. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of, we need to be talking about, because we don't want to, like, why would we want to live in a world where these subjects aren't being valued? Because a world where we don't value these subjects, and a world where we don't research and study these subjects, and an economy which doesn't value these subjects is not a world which I can imagine being very nice. So please remember to sign the petition. I've linked it in the description box. When one university gets away with something like this, it also makes it easier for other universities to do the same. And so I really would encourage you to sign the petition. We really want to try and get it to 50,000 signatures. We're currently on 30,000. And so if you could sign it, it would mean a lot to me personally. And yes, thank you so much for watching. And as I hope has been emphatically clear, I stand with my tutors.